So we have some new updated information on the two big Canon RF cameras that are supposedly coming out here in 2024. Mainly the fact that the Canon EOS R1 is going to be coming out before the Canon EOS R5, but also we learned the fact that the Canon EOS R1 is going to have, at least according to Canon Rumors, that it will have less resolution than most people anticipated, given the interpretation that it's not going to be an 8K video camera, and that's most likely going to sit with the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. So someone like me who does professional video as a career, does this to me kill the instance of potentially of an EOS R1? Is this something that if you are a serious video shooter, is this a camera you should no longer consider, since the fact that it won't have any 8K? Well, no, but honestly, the 8K is not necessarily the reason you should probably not look at it. And today I'm going to be taking the very little that we know about the R1, the history of other lines of Canon's cameras, mainly the 1DX line, to sort of take a guess of where this camera is going to be, who is this camera for, and if you, as a serious video person, should consider the EOS R1. Thank you guys for joining me. My name is James Jackson. If you're new here, I do tips, tricks, news, and reviews for the film and video making industry. Now, this is coming from Canon Rumors, which most rumor sites can be hit or miss, but over the years, Canon Rumors has been fairly accurate, and there's also other sources that are saying the same thing, that those that are looking for the R1 to be this big, high-power, high-resolution 8K camera, that's not necessarily what this camera is going to be. And some people may see this as a step down, this is a disappointment, because obviously, if this is the R1, which is supposed to be the flagship camera coming from Canon for their RF line, if it's not 8K, then this seems to be, for some people, at least for who are more video-oriented, a step down, due to the fact that right now, the current EOS R5 and the R5C both shoot 8K video, with the R5C shooting 8K up to 60 frames a second if you use external power. I never actually thought the R1 was going to be this. To me, I felt like Canon was always going to reserve that for the R5 II or the R5C II, just given the fact that that's sort of been the lineup. I feel like this camera is going to be a little bit more closer to something like an R3 versus, say, an R5, but it's going to, in terms of resolution and specs, it's going to be in between, weirdly enough, but obviously it's going to be priced at a higher premium than necessarily the R1. So a lot of people are probably wondering, well, if it's an in-between between an R3 and an R5, but it's going to be priced higher, how does that make any sense, especially if you're something to look at video? Well, I want to first go ahead and look back at the history of Canon to sort of get a gauge of what this camera is sort of really more likely to look at. I think we should look back at the previous flagship series of cameras from Canon from their EF line of cameras, and that would be the 1DX series. Regardless of what you may feel in terms of the resolution, the 1DX was never a high resolution camera or a camera that was touted to have high resolution. The camera was always about two things: speed and rigidity. A 1DX was designed to basically go into any environment that you would need it to be, whether if it's underwater, whether if it's in the icelands of Mount Everest or whatever, snowy, icy. The camera, those series of cameras were designed to go anywhere. So it needed the best weather sealing, the best weather resistance the body can take, and it also had to be reliable. You can throw it anywhere, it will survive a lot of beatings, and it also can deal with any sort of environmental conditions. Now, I'd like to pause for a brief moment to say, if you guys are enjoying this content, please definitely make sure to hit the subscribe button and hit that bell so you can stay up to date on all the content going forward, and also leave a like, because those definitely help the channel out. The other thing about the 1DX series was always the speed. The speed mainly in terms of photography, and in this case, the speed of frame rates per second. I know some people sort of kind of look back because that's kind of what the R3 was, which was more seen as an action camera, sports journalism. That's sort of what the R3. But I think we also need to keep in mind the R3 was kind of a filler role until the R1 was to be available. And again, if we look back at the 1DX series, these were cameras that were used for sports, especially extreme sports and high-end action scenes to make sure you can capture that moment. Also, nature wildlife, where you had to follow fast animals. That's sort of where that ecosystem is. And it only makes sense that the R1 fits this same type of environment. So in these cases, high resolution is not necessarily the thing. However, I do expect Canon to bump up the resolution somewhat. Maybe not as high as 8K, but probably somewhere between 30 and 35 megapixels, which technically would get you QHD 4K, but at the very least, I would expect some sort of 6K resolution. Again, the main thing is speed and rigidity. I think the key points of the R1 is going to be possible AI innovations, a lot, especially GPS and Wi-Fi. I think they're going to probably try to put in something like that can have like a built-in camera in the cloud. I guarantee you the body's going to be built like a tank. They're going to be built to deal with anything. So I think that's where a lot of, in terms of, it's going to be, in terms of the ergos, in terms of that, as well as I think it's going to be more in terms, especially on the photography side, it's going to be more high frame rate options. But in terms of video, I expect 6K, maybe even 7K up to 60 frames a second in 12-bit RAW, which would be a very unique situation. Now, the question is really the shutter. Now, given the fact that, especially I know Canon's waited so long to get this camera out, now this may not be something that we necessarily see in a global shutter like we would see in the A9 III, but I would definitely expect Canon to really focus on reducing the rolling shutter as minimal as possible, probably definitely under 10 milliseconds. I'd probably say in shooting we'll probably get like when you can shoot 14-bit RAW in like 50 frames a second or even 60 frames a second. That's probably where it's going to go. And then possibly, I would say 120 frames per second 4K in full-on 10-bit 422. So looking at all of this and looking at the rumors and the specs, who do I think this camera is for? Well, me personally, I believe this camera is for exactly what the market has always been. It's been for extreme action shooters, people that shoot for extreme sports, shooting things for like the X Games and things like that. People that work for like National Geographic and Discovery that go out and have to film documentaries out in extreme environment conditions. And also I would say news journalists who need to go into potentially conflict areas, but still have to be discreet, but also be able to get great stills and great photography for that. In terms of cinema, I don't really see a place for this camera outside of maybe drone footage where you can put it on FPV or put it on an Inspire where you hook it up to get that full frame equivalence and use it that way. Outside of that, I don't really see this, and I don't think anybody who's looking more towards going in the field of filmmaking that they should look at this camera for that type of work. Or even something like weddings. I think there's going to be much better options coming available, and there's options better, I think, better available right now for wedding filmmakers throughout Canon's ecosystem right now. The R1 is really targeted for very specific people that need very specific needs, and they're willing to pay a premium for it. And that's right now my thoughts on the rumors update on the EOS R1. I'm interested to hear more about it. I know my buddy Simon at Ordinary Filmmakers is giving his thoughts on it, but I would love to know what you guys think. Let me know, leave your comments below. As always, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and until next time, take care everyone.